Unmatched Mind. This is Vinny. Today we're talking with Dr. Po-Chi Wu. Dr. Wu is an entrepreneur, professor, author. He teaches entrepreneurship at the School of Business and Management at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. His resume is a mile long. He's got a degree in molecular biology, math, music. He's an author. Also a former venture capitalist and entrepreneur over in Asia and also here in the States, in Silicon Valley. His dad was actually considered the father of modern physics in China. How cool is that? So obviously a well-accomplished man, well-accomplished family. I'm really grateful Dr. Wu was able to give me an hour of his time. I think we had a really good discussion. We talked about social media and its impact on society and humanity. We kind of went, we went a little all over the place in a good way. I think, that the topic really touches on a lot of things. So we just kind of let the conversation go, where we felt it needed to go. But we touched on confirmation bias, filter bubbles, even the role of dopamine and things that happen in the brain when we stare at technology. We talked a little bit about, some of even just some of the games that our kids are watching and using, and the actual psychology behind how these games are developed. And I brought up the point of how I think that there's just as many psychologists on board these software development teams as there are software developers writing these games. I've seen it firsthand. They're absolutely addicting. So anyway, we touched on a lot of things. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you do as well. So with that, I give you Dr. Wu. Well, Dr. Wu, I appreciate your time. I know you're super busy. You got a million things going on, so I definitely appreciate it. So I found you, I think it was psychologytoday.com. It's this whole social media thing, right? I think I found you. I found a couple blogs of yours where you had, made a correlation with social media and the corollary to blockchain, the underlying technology and behind Bitcoin and all those digital currencies. So I guess, we're going to probably go all over the place because I think the social media thing is a big topic, and it's a lot of little, there's a lot of tangents we'll go on. But I guess to start, tell the listeners who you are, what your focus is, what your interests are, and what you're all about.
Okay. Thank you, Vinny. I appreciate very much the invitation to participate with you. Sure. I just came back from this thing called a Conference on World Affairs, hosted by the University of Colorado at Boulder. And it's a 5-day event, completely free to the public. We have over 100 speakers and something like 60,000 attendees over the 5 days. And every day there are multiple sessions in multiple rooms. The whole thing is video and audio, both recorded and live streamed. So it's a really interesting event. And what was really interesting was when I was asked to introduce myself, people are asked, because I was invited as a speaker, as a participant in the panels, what panels are you speaking on? So I first couple of days, I would tell them, well, I'm on 2 panels on China, innovation, China's global strategies, a couple of panels on America, U.S., the competitiveness in innovation, and another one called Pass the Privilege, so a little bit about income gap and other kinds of gaps. One on how music inspires us, because I have a background in music as well. And then there are a couple of other random things. And so by the 3rd day, I started telling people, a little bit shorter form. And I said, I'm 71 years old. I'm the same age as this conference. And so I've been a lot of places, done a lot of things. And what I'd rather do instead of reciting my biography is give you 3 key words that I'd like you to associate with me. And the first is curiosity, because I did this TEDx talk, and it's called Who Killed Curiosity? It's the first reference if you do a search on YouTube on my name. And then the second is lifelong learning, And the third word concept is positive feedback loops. And I felt this was a good way to start a conversation, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
people did respond to that. By the last day, I got tired of even that. I thought this is really too long. And at that time, I'd already done, eight of these panel presentations, and they're all discussion. They were not so much presentation. I didn't have to present. I talked for like each of, three or four panelists. We'd say a few words for about 5 minutes, and then it was all Q&A with a moderator and from physical attendees as well as online attendees.
Hmm.
So by the last day, I was telling people, do you know why they invited me here? I can talk. I can talk about almost anything with almost anybody for virtually any period of time. So that's probably between all
What
of
are you telling me to
this,
strap
right?
in?
Yeah, but in a more formal sense, of course, I do teach entrepreneurship at the university level. I've been doing that for 10 years, both here in the United States at UC Berkeley last year, the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology for several years prior to that. And then just kind of reach back 30 years. I was one of the pioneers in venture capital. And early stage companies. I've been doing that both here in Silicon Valley, since that's where I live, as well as in Asia, specifically more Greater China. So that's Taiwan, Hong Kong, mainland China, a little bit in Southeast Asia around Singapore.
Hmm.
And that's as good a place as any to start.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent background. Well, I'm not going to give my background because it's not that glamorous, but no, I mean, so no, I appreciate that. I mean, I mean, related to that conference you were at, I mean, I think when we spoke, you basically made me jealous and of how cool it was going to be. I was like, I'd love to be there,
Well,
but
plan on it for next year.
I know, it's so it's an annual thing.
Yeah, it is, right? 70 years, 71 years
71 years.
already,
That's right. Wow, that's
and
great. So it was
completely
your first
free.
time there, or how many?
Well, for the invited guests, they did not offer any honorarium. They did not offer to pay our travel expenses. But
Mm,
as long as I could get myself to the Denver airport, then after that, and until the time I depart from the Denver airport, no out of pocket expenses. They had transportation from the airport. They had a host family. Provide me lodging, lunches and dinners with groups and people. So really
very
easy.
cool. Wow. Yeah, and you actually enjoyed your time there, and there's a win-win.
Oh, so
Excellent.
exciting. It's such an incredible opportunity to meet people from all over the world, people you never get to meet. And, that's a
Right.
whole nother kind of a topic.
Well, exactly, and that actually sort of ties into this topic we're talking about social media today, and filter bubbles, and just this echo chamber of social media. How we really only interact with folks that have the exact same viewpoints as we do. So when you touched on that, it's like you're going to these, you're at this conference and probably expanding your horizons, just talking to folks that you never would have spoken to before, probably from different
Exactly.
backgrounds, different.
And if we want to get a little bit closer to the social media, there are several aspects of this whole phenomenon that are truly fascinating, and in that sense, let's call it revolutionary for how society has been progressing. And
Mhm.
of course, the superficial layer as well, anybody can connect with anybody, basically, right? That's the great promise of the internet, and it's absolutely, come true. And it's very easy, relatively, to form or establish communities of interest, small group or larger group of people who like the things that you like the things that you say, or things that you refer to.
Right.
And that has really, really changed, I think, more mindset than anything else. You have very radical people with very radical ideas, and they can find support for their radical ideas. Things that are more mainstream obviously can get a lot of opinion. Things that are particularly emotional. I mean, there's a whole nother layer of social media when we talk about the videos and Instagram now, and so on, where there isn't necessarily a lot of message other than, oh, isn't that cute, or isn't that funny, or isn't that silly.
Right.
And all of those are quite interesting because they are sort of validating. But what happens is the other half of freedom, any freedom, is the accountability, right? If we want to be free, we have to be very clear what are the boundaries of our freedom. So if I was talking to you in person and I was getting angry with you, my freedom ends if when my fist starts getting close to your
Right.
face. I
Exactly.
have no right to do that. I can express myself verbally as vigorously as I choose, but I certainly cannot invade your space physically. I cannot harm you. That is not appropriate. Um, and the problem with online is there's no sense of boundary, right? People think they can say anything and they can do anything, and
Oh, they're much
so
meaner
the,
online, absolutely, than in person.
yeah, the rhetoric, yeah, exactly. You have no sense of that. You have no sense of distance or place. And that's an interesting notion. You don't hear that as much in discussions about social media. People tend to look at, I would think, the more superficial layers. And that's not where the action is, literally, right? It's all at the mindset level. It's all at these subtle assumptions that we make in our interactions with people. Again, what is
Yeah.
appropriate, what is good manners, what is bad manners. And of course, with the spell check and everything, people are increasingly less literate, right? They don't
Yep.
complete sentences, no pay attention to
Just
spelling, of
the
course,
red
no
red
grammar.
squiggly line, yeah, the red squiggly line, so I can look for it.
Yeah, and okay, that's fine. That's a convenience, but what are we losing, right? I mean, and that's a much larger topic of what's happening with our society, uh, especially from technology. We are pushing so much new technology that seems to be all about, one button, no muss, no fuss, no thinking.
Right.
Everything is for convenience, but then later on, if anything goes wrong, oh my God, you have to go through the fine print. You can't get satisfaction. There's no customer service. In many ways, it's so horrendous because the fundamental principle of a business providing a product or service to a customer, obviously with some concept of customer service, that's the key thing here,
Yeah.
right? The
Yep.
idea is not to make something easy. Here's a hot button, press a hot button, and take your chances. You might get
Right.
anything.
Yep. Well, it's funny. So what you're summarizing, I think when you and I first spoke, it was, I think I made the analogy that, that I felt like the internet, the internet in general, Google, Facebook, social media as well, it's almost like I feel like that, I think I made an analogy to food and the processed food that we eat, and whereas our bodies have not evolved to keep up and to process all the crap we're eating, right? And we're getting a lot of disease from it, sugars and the high processed carbohydrates and the for-profit food industry. I think I made the analogy there, that I feel like the social media and the internet is more or less that way to humanity, where humanity is lagging behind. Our social interaction, our social dynamic, our ability to interact with other human beings, has not kept up with what social media is allowing us to do now.
Completely agree with that. And again, it's generalized to all the technology. Over the last 30 years, thanks to this phenomenon they call Moore's Law,
Mhm.
the computing power has just literally skyrocketed. It doubles exponentially. So we're in a period of exponential growth. Every 2 years, everything doubles and doubles and doubles.
Yep.
So the power of a smartphone today is more than all the computing capacity that was available to send a man to the moon, literally.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, do we understand what's going on the technology? Not really. I mean, of course, the engineers understand what the technology is, but as a society and even among individuals, I think there are relatively few people who have really been thoughtful about absorbing all of what happens when you, just as we talked earlier about this idea of privacy or the boundaries, or what does education actually mean? Ooh, sorry about that. Um, Increasingly, nothing seems to matter other than connectivity, and we don't know what to do with that. That's overwhelming. It's literally overwhelming.
Yeah.
That's where all this idea of fake news, not just Trump's definition of fake news, but things that really are simply not legitimate postings of whatever and mad ravings, and it's getting increasingly difficult for people to sort through because they don't have any metrics. They don't have any guidelines that help them understand. And if you're looking beyond a domain that you have some knowledge of, you really are lost and you're overwhelmed because there are 10,000, 100,000, millions of references to almost everything.
Yeah, and the problem, confirmation bias, right, is something that I think I threw in the notes that I sent you. I mean, I feel like even you take social media out of it for a second, just Google, right? It's very easy. I talk about this with friends and family all the time. If you search for, uh, I don't know, warm water gives you cancer, you'll find 10,000 hits on Google that say that affirm that. I mean, you could
Yes.
search for things that the way you phrase a question will literally give you those answers.
Exactly right. That is one of the most difficult things. So again, it's a deeper level of how our brain naturally works,
Mhm.
right? We have all sorts of natural tendencies, and then layer onto that the other aspects of our other biases we have. And one of the things I love to talk about are filters. We have so many filters, not just visually, but mentally, about what sorts of things, because our brain works by looking at patterns. We see new data points and we try to fit them into existing patterns, which
Right.
is kind of a way of describing cognitive bias. But it's the other part, which is when we have a pattern and we encounter new data points that don't seem to fit our pattern. The question is, what do we do with them?
Mhm.
Right? Do we simply ignore them and say, no, 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 they're not part of our pattern, so they're not important? Or do we have to explore them? So in my work with entrepreneurs, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, venture capitalist, sometimes those outliers are incredibly valuable. They're really, really important. And they are not mainstream, and that's why they are important.
Mm.
But that's a different mindset. Again, it requires a different kind of training and education and so on. So, it's difficult, and our educational system doesn't actually train us to live in this world of this kind of unlimited, uncurated type of knowledge. It's an extraordinarily narrowly defined set of knowledge that is presumably or mostly 99.9% verified and reliable, but increasingly less relevant. And this is the problem for our young people.
Mhm.
And this is also why they are turning to social media and why social media is so appealing. It gives it instant gratification, which is another hallmark of our contemporary society. And it gives them a way, however valid or however good that filtering system is, from friends and other so-called referrals, gives them some reference points to all that stuff that they're seeing online, which academia doesn't address. Academia just forget it, it's not important, or
Right, right.
and this is a big mistake. We have to help them, help young people, help everyone, understand how to think more critically, how to evaluate for themselves what kinds of questions. That's mostly what I teach is, what questions should you be asking? And obviously, if you're thinking about things you don't know anything about, it's
Right,
very
right.
difficult to ask questions.
I mean, so even in yeah, I mean, 100%. Even when the data coming at you, like I'm thinking about a Facebook news feed or whatever, there's kind of two prongs I look at it. You mentioned the fake news thing, right? Some things are just blatantly wrong and fake, and people run with them and they share them, and they just start this outrage culture of look at this, this is horrible, how can this be? And they just start pointing fingers across the other side, and that goes that's one side of it. The other side of it, I think, that's even a little more a little a little more dangerous, in my opinion, is even when things even when you're assuming, just for the sake of argument, all the data you're receiving, all the feeds, all the all the topics you're seeing are true. If those are all being come from one direction, from one viewpoint, those things might be true in and of themselves, but you're still seeing one side or a very biased view of the world. And I think that's where this whole filter bubble concept comes in. Now, so I filter bubbles? That's kind of an older topic now. If it was this, do you remember that TED talk that I think his name was Eli? I wrote it down here. Eli Pariser. I might be butchering his name. I don't know if
Yeah, I honestly I don't know that. I've heard the term, but I don't think I've heard that particular talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically. I mean, you've already described it in essence, right? In essence, so I guess watching that TED talk, Eli had quoted Mark Zuckerberg as saying, "This is gosh, back in I think it was 2012. This TED talk."
I know it seems like forever.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. Um, I think so. Zuckerberg said, and I quote, "A squirrel dying in front of." Well, sorry, let me back up. The journalist, a journalist was talking to Mark Zuckerberg and said, "Hey, Mark, why is the news feed so important?" I guess they were really putting a ton of resources and
Mm,
funding into the news feed,
mm.
and he basically summarized, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but he basically said to the journalist, a squirrel dying in front of your house may be more relevant to your interest right now than people dying in Africa.
Oh,
Right? So,
jeez.
it sounds like almost hyperbole
Uh,
and it's almost a little extreme but, what he was really saying was, if you really look at it, I wanna show you what you want to see.
yeah,
What is that gonna do? It's gonna get you more clicking, gonna
yeah,
keep you on the page longer, gonna
yeah,
keep you in that zone longer.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so even in that case, even when that info he's showing you is
Hmm.
true and accurate, it's
Hmm.
not, I just feel like we're closing our minds. We're becoming less
Hmm.
open because I'm just seeing what I thought I wanted to see anyway.
Agreed, agreed. And this is what people I think mistakenly blame the whole capitalist system. And this is actually a topic I mentioned last week in Boulder. Capitalism is a theory, it's an ideology, it's now a political system, an economic system. But we forget that the roots of capitalism is a tool,
Mm,
right? It's a tool by which society chooses to improve itself through private ownership. That's the whole point.
right,
But someone has to make this stuff. You can't
right,
say, well, we don't like private ownership, but we still have to make stuff. Well, okay, then who's going to make it, right?
mhm,
Okay, is the government going to make it? Well, okay, well, then the whole series of questions about that. But pretty much all over the world, that particular set of experiments has not shown to be successful. So again, going back to the roots is if you're trying to build a business, the essence of a business is to provide a product or service that people want and are willing to pay for. But now if you push the marketing side to the extreme, which is what happens on things like Google search, is that by uh, let's just call it manipulating the content or allocating, maybe is a
mhm,
more neutral term, allocating the content, just as you mentioned, to your particular interests and trying to find those emotional hooks, right, that keep you interested and excited and
right,
keep you there longer. It sounds like it's what you want, but actually it's totally unproductive. I mean, it's another version of the lotus eater kind of metaphor, which has been around for thousands of years, right?
yeah,
You enter the land of lotus eaters, and you think you're in heaven, but actually you're just lying around being this consumer, this
right,
perfect consumer, and with no brain, no body, no action, no nothing. You're simply this passive sponge of pleasure, which, if someone were to describe it that way, I think even the most dedicated consumers would kind of be a little bit appalled. By the way, again, I'm sorry if I keep referring to this conference, but at least it's free and open to the public, so I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
make money for them. Um,
Nonprofit plug, yeah,
yeah, there was a whole series of sessions uh, going through the entire movie Wall E, right? That
oh
famous
yeah,
Pixar movie, and there's exactly that same metaphor. This group of there's a spaceship that's been traveling like for 700 years, and these are humans who are put on this spaceship. This was going to be their last. Well, kind of their last refuge. They would go and find some place because the Earth was, coming to an end, the apocalyptic end of the Earth, and that's what you saw. You saw these just gigantic lumpy, lumps of flesh who could not even stand up. And they don't see anything beyond a screen,
yep,
which
yep.
obviously feeds them whatever and their food and everything. I mean, it was just amazing, and obviously very prescient in this particular topic that we're talking about.
Right, right. They're just getting fed almost their unhealthy, almost primal just instincts, just constantly getting fed in a way,
Yeah,
and they just think,
of course, and electronically, right? You had robots that took care of everything. You didn't have to lift a finger. And by the way, you literally could not stand up. Your body, the bones had degenerated
right,
after so many centuries, right? And the babies were born. They look like that. Oh, it's just amazing.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Uh,
well, what was scary is, and you kind of touched on this in the beginning, but like the evolution of the internet, right? You start with this thing, hey, before the internet, we're a bunch of, people around the, around the country, around the globe, that to talk to each other, obviously you had phones and things like that, but you couldn't, you're thinking, oh, when the internet hits, we're really going to come together, and this can finally be where we can start breaking down some of our biases, breaking down some of our our cultural gaps, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm kind of afraid of, and just kind of researching a little bit, getting ready for this conversation, I almost feel like, I'm sure that's happened a lot. I'm sure
Mhm.
I fully believe that has happened. But with, again, with these algorithms telling me what I want to see, if I'm a pro Trump guy, and
Mhm.
Google knows that. Google knows my search.
Mhm.
It knows. I mean, it scans your email, right? It
Yeah.
knows your GPS location, so
Oh,
it'll
yeah.
know if you went to a Trump rally, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it will know pretty much everything.
Yep.
So now, with knowing that, if I search for, Donald Trump did X, Y, and Z, I'm going to get my view, what I would want to see and what I would want to preach from the mountain. I would get that.
Right.
So what is that going to do? That's going to further divide me from my fellow progressive friend or family member,
Right.
which,
Exactly.
that shouldn't be the case. Now, if they're
Exactly
going to do the
right.
same thing, and they're going to get their left viewpoint, and all I'm going to
Yep.
think in my head when I'm looking at my right viewpoint or their whatever, I'm going to just, in my head, I'm thinking, what idiots they are. How can they not see it? Oh, data's right there. It just
Yeah.
keeps coming in.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So and I don't know what the solution is. I mean,
Yeah.
I think what I had typed up in some of the documents I sent you, I a while ago. This was 4 or 5 years ago. I made a little, and I'm not an avid Facebook user. I kind of just follow, if I find things that are cool and I just hit share. I don't really do much original, content on there. But I remember typing one of my 5 probably original actual thoughts I typed into the thing was, I said, it's really interesting how we basically follow pages that we like, and then we
Mhm.
reshare and post those
Mhm.
pages to others. I
Yep.
said, well, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be neat? So then I just start, all I am seeing and consuming is pages and, and feeds that I like. So
Mhm.
I literally started, and I think I said this, I started to like pages that I almost had to remind myself that, "No, I don't, oh, that guy, this guy disgusts me. I can't stand her views." But I'm like, whoa, hold on, right? I got to step outside myself a little bit and say, let me
Yeah.
click that button. And then it's amazing when there'd be some event, some political event happen, you'd get,
Mhm.
and the things you'd see in your news feed, this person was the worst. This was the worst day ever for this person. On the next feed, this
Mm.
was the best day for this person. It's like, really, who's right, who's wrong? And the answer is
Yeah.
neither. But
Yeah.
it's scary. I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but I'm just hoping. I mean, and again, some of the motivation for these discussions, I think, are to hopefully mitigate that, and hopefully people listen and say, wow, I never thought of that. Let me start subscribing to the left or to the right or to the whatever.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that appealed to me about wanting to have these kinds of conversations with you, Vinny, is that you do want to cover a lot of different points of view. Hopefully, uncover some insights or things, some oddities that different people might choose to offer, and I think that is important. I think so we're seeing this play out in the political arena, right? We have, particularly in the Democratic Party, you've got a slew of candidates, and each one of them has different. They're all being
Yep.
challenged by the journalists. Okay, how do we deal with this divide in the population,
Hmm.
which is actually being enforced not only by Trump but by other political ideologues, basically manipulated. And I think the answer for them is what is it? Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke is such a cool guy, right? He's really capturing a lot of attention, and of course there are a lot of women, and they're doing their part as well. Is about having more of these smaller rallies in smaller towns, and really trying to bring people together. You get Democrats and Republicans to sit together and talk in a relatively civilized way. That's what we really need. We need to bring back the people to people thing, to understand people as a whole. We are all paradoxical. We are all yeah. We are all, what was I going to say? Inconsistent. We have conflicting views for ourselves as well as for others. We're very complex, and it's really horrible that any kind of reductionist, propaganda try to say, well, okay, he's Republican because he's this white middle-aged male.
Right.
That's not fair. Or you have this young Latina woman who is 25 years old and a firebrand, and
Right.
so what? I mean, they still all have families. They may have children. They have educational issues. I mean, really, life isn't that different. Beyond the ideology. So we really have to find ways to understand you're completely entitled to whatever your beliefs, your ideologies. But that does not have to determine how you behave. We have to bring back what they call civil society, and maybe a civilized society, where we can not just tolerate, but really accept the fact that it is, in fact, the diversity of opinion, diversity of beliefs, and diversity of tastes that builds a rich society that we can all benefit from. Otherwise, we become increasingly narrow in our interests and what we're offered, and life becomes incredibly boring. Whether
Sure.
it's left, right, or some alien point of view.
But more
This is
comfortable.
not the right idea. Yeah, but
And that's the
even
problem, right?
people who love their comfort zone, they still want something a little bit different from once in a while, and that's what people forget.
Now, yeah, I mean, I would love to see, and now the problem is you can't see this in the political arena because everything is a debate. But and I've been, I've almost started some conversations with folks when I want to talk about complicated things. I almost start prefacing, hey, I don't want to have a debate. I want to have a discussion. Huge difference, right? Huge difference. Like
Yeah,
I'm not here to win anything. I'm not, and
yeah.
I hope you're not either. Let's just talk about this really complicated thing. And I think most folks can do that. I think when
Mhm.
when they're disarmed, you're like, okay, I'm not, and I think it's how, you have to be a little gentle in how you say things and how you approach things. But I think that, the social media thing, pulling it back to there, that the problem there is it just fuels debate because an open,
Yeah.
honest discussion is not that, it's not that juicy, right? If it
Hmm.
bleeds, it leads kind of thing, right? So it's not that,
Yeah,
it's just not, if you and I were fighting right now and you were super right winger and I was a super left winger or vice
yeah,
versa, and we were just going at it,
yeah,
I, the
yeah.
downloads for this thing would probably be, 20 times what it is going to be. Right. It's just, that's the way it
Yeah,
works. And I mean,
yeah,
I,
right.
I don't, I don't like that reality, but, and unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that have platforms realize that, and
Mhm,
it's,
mhm.
they need to put food on the table. So they take that route. And that's, I don't know. Uh, I
Yeah, it's difficult to get people to just want to commit to not only being civilized, but to being thoughtful, right? People being thoughtful is hard work.
Yep.
Thinking is hard work. Asking critical questions and being, in that sense, more objective, not just questioning, well, why do you believe? Well, even that's actually a good question. Why do you believe what you believe? But in a in a polite sort of way.
Right.
It's not so easy. And yes, it doesn't have the same passion, right? Because it's kind of this intellectual exercise. But that's not fair either. There's plenty of room for passion. It's just, again, how you want to behave. It's like the difference between being physically violent and just being very strong about your feelings.
Right, right. Now, do you think you wrote in your blog, what was the name of it? Is social media destroying democracy? So we'll get
That
to
was
what
a
you actually,
question.
what the answer there, what you think, yes or no there. But I mean, you talk a lot about fear. So
Uh-huh.
what is that? I mean, is that your, is that your, is it your belief that fear is literally the thing that keeps us, only following the things we want to see and only hearing the things we want to hear and subscribing only to the pages, only having these things, feed our quote unquote news feed are that we want to see? Is that,
Fair, you mean fairness?
oh, fear, FEAR, like
Oh,
fearful.
fear.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
So
I
I'm too
think
afraid to like look at the other side because I
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
agree.
yeah. Oh, I absolutely believe that we, particularly American society, we love our celebrities, we love our superheroes. I mean, every culture, I'm sure, has heroes. I don't think. Well, I don't know. I've never done that study of superheroes. I tend to think of heroes more the sort of mythological heroes because that's what I grew up, right? The Greek gods and all of that. And then after that, the sort of modern superhero, which I guess is sort of post World War II, right?
Hmm.
The cartoons, the comic books. I think the U.S. certainly has been the most successful. That's very clear, right? It is a comic. That's interesting, right? I hadn't thought of it that way. It is a comic tradition of comic books, and I think the U.S. has done better at that because we really are a culture that's obsessed with celebrities, and unfortunately, we don't just respect celebrities. We actually like to tear them down, and this is really very bizarre. I have never really felt very comfortable and understand this whole philosophy. We build up heroes, we can make them heroes overnight, and then a slight misstep, and we just tear them down and trample all over them. And then every so often we have someone like Tiger Woods, right? He came back
Right, right.
this past weekend, to win the Masters after a 11-year dry spell. Really a horrendous experience. Now, of course, he provoked it. He caused the
Yeah, he screwed up.
uh,
I mean,
disappointment.
he,
Yeah, no, he screwed up, but he caused all this
yep,
disappointment, and then he was reviled up and down. And of course, he beat himself into the ground, and he lost his confidence
right.
literally. But for him, this is such an amazing tale of redemption. So right now, I mean, he is the hero du jour,
Hmm.
which is fine. I've always admired his talent as a golfer. Truly, truly extraordinary, and that's wonderful. But many people really don't understand that. Again, it's about celebrities, and that's a mistake, because even celebrities have very short lifetimes, right? The
Yeah,
best actors, we have some actors now who have worked for 50 years or 60 years and so on. They've had up and down in their career, but it's still only a tiny handful. Most actors and celebrities have probably a lifetime somewhere between 5 and 10 years. 10 years might even be long. I,
yeah.
I don't know.
The
I'm
Betty
not a
Whites of the
study of
world,
that.
those are few and far between for sure. Right,
Exactly,
right,
exactly. But this is a certain mindset, right? About what we care about, what we value, how we choose to value, how we want to learn from them, or it. I don't know. It's just a different way of thinking about role models and what they contribute to society. And of course, particularly in the acting profession, they are intensely emotional people. So their private lives,
right.
as well as their public lives, it's just crazy, and I think very confusing. But it makes for great press, right? It makes for great publicity.
Well, you
And it's all part of the same social media phenomenon, I think, because that's what these young stars. You have people who go on YouTube and they have 1 million followers, and they think,
right.
wow, I'm this really hot stuff.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It's artificial. I mean, but I mean, so you brought up the celebrity thing, and you said something that kind of resonated. That's I actually had in my notes here. That you said we tear them down. We like to tear them down. So is that's another thing that in the social media world now it's this I don't even want to call it call out culture or deplatforming. If someone messes up even in the slightest, it is usually someone from the opposite aisle in the political spectrum wants to deplatform them
Hmm.
completely. Like you were
Hmm.
a saint for 40 years. You said one
Hmm.
wrong thing, and a lot of
Hmm.
times it was I mean, nuance has been lost. No one
Hmm.
respects nuance anymore. But one, and
Right,
then just your whole career is over now because you said this thing that touched one of the five,
right.
hot button, topics of the day. What is that about? I mean, is that related? Is this social media society creating that, or is that kind of unrelated, or is it just that we can see and hear everyone say everything now because of digital transfer of data?
Yeah. Okay. So while you were talking, I realized that I hadn't gotten off topic from
No,
the
that's
the
okay.
fear part, and fear. Fear is really interesting because one of the challenges I pose to my students in my entrepreneurship courses is I tell them, we all live in a comfort zone, right? And you can visualize that as a circle, if you will, or a
Right.
sphere. And what I ask them is, what is at the boundary? Okay, how do you know that you are at the boundary of your comfort zone? Also, they say, well, of course, I'm getting uncomfortable, but why are you getting uncomfortable? What is it that makes you uncomfortable? You know,
Interesting.
what
Yeah. Like,
under what conditions do you feel uncomfortable? And of course, it all relates to fear. Ultimately, some kind of fear of the unknown, fear of your own insecurity, fear that somehow you are not qualified, or or you're just afraid that you'll be
yeah.
afraid.
Yeah.
You know, it's really quite extraordinary. And the thing with that we've been talking about this afternoon in terms of the internet and social media is also this is absolutely fueled by this kind of fear. You know, first fear is, am I going to find anybody that I like?
Yeah.
Right? Am I going to find anybody that likes me? Am I going to uh, how is my voice going to be heard? Um,
Right. Right.
the fear that fear of being left out. That's the big one, right? Especially among millennials, and that is such a great commercial message. It's deadly, right?
Oh
FOMO.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Heard the term. Yeah.
But it pushes product like nothing
Yep.
else. And it's ideal for this kind of very volatile, emotion, impulse driven type of commerce, which again, it's a perfectly okay business tactic. It's not terribly healthy. It's not really doing anything for anybody other than generating sales. But you know, I think that, again, this goes back to the fundamental principle of the business, that it should have some type of inherent morality and ethics. And I think what you've been saying and we've been talking about today is the internet as a whole by itself doesn't have that core, doesn't have any morality or or ethics built in, because the idea was to make it as free and as uncontrolled
Right.
as possible.
Yep.
Now, that's not true in every country, right? In China, the Chinese government does control and prevents access to many websites. You know, for Chinese citizens or people living in
Right.
China, they cannot access things like Google or Facebook or YouTube and so on. And there are many, many others that they also restrict control. And in Europe, there are also countries that restrict control. And you have a whole discussion of how appropriate that is. But these are attempts. Forget about the government ideology side. These are attempts to, in many ways, protect their citizens from what they think are so-called, and I put this in quotation marks, dangerous influences. Now, in China, it's very much very political things, right? Even before this became so serious, and 20 years ago, it was about certain keywords. They wouldn't block the site, but they would, if you tried to, for example, Google anything about Taiwan, instantly,
Yeah.
your browser would not go anywhere useful at all. Now, that's political, and again, whether you think that's right or not, it's a different question. But there
I
is
think it's
a
harmful,
certain
but
basis there. It's a
right.
curation phenomenon. For the rest of us, particularly in America, it's totally uncurated, it's totally free. It's literally the sort of wild, wild west, and people. American people love that idea that you are completely unfettered. So what happens is that you channel all of your non-fear, if you will. You are if you are quite fearless, you can find just an infinite number of things to be even more fearful of. So it will build on whatever paranoia you have. That's already in itself somewhat dangerous. That's not something I'm not advocating censorship or the curation idea I'm talking about. But I think, as you pointed out, it's part of the filtering, and we all have to, each of us as users and consumers, we have to again apply some intelligence to what we're doing, so that we don't actually get trapped in this wasting of time and resources just because it benefits somebody else's business, or even somebody else's rant.
Right.
The more you fuel excuse me, by fuel radical ideas by giving them attention, well, even if you don't like them, they feel empowered, right? They feel, so their fear of being rejected goes down.
Mm.
So fear, we don't talk enough about fear in American culture. We try to tough it out. We want to be Again, it's kind of like the Wild West where you have cowboys, men were
Right,
men.
right.
Yeah, you don't say that anymore. But when I was growing up, that was still
Oh,
an
same
ideal.
here. I mean, I'm 42, and that's how I was brought up. 100%. It was you got to
Yeah.
cut, you rub some dirt in it, move on. Literally, I mean, that's what my dad did, and that was, and I think, I mean, I think there's a lot of good in that mentality, but yeah, you're right. It could go too far, right? Like,
Yeah, and now we're on the opposite end. Every night we see so many commercials on public, not public, but commercial television that are for different kinds of pains, particularly chronic pains, and for older populations, heart disease or high blood
there you go.
pressure, high cholesterol,
Pharmaceuticals.
all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things.
That's a whole nother podcast.
And they're
Yeah,
all turning us into junkies. If you listen carefully to what they're talking about, of course they have the disclaimer with here are these side effects and they're really horrible. But by the way, you take this and you can do anything a 35-year-old can do.
right.
They don't use that
Yeah. Yep.
number, but that's the idea. And what they forget, and that's because we all fear pain, right? But what they forget is that really pain, some kinds of pain, are really important signals to us that we have to change our lives. We have to be doing something different, whether it's nutritionally or exercise
Spot on.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep. Absolutely.
Pain is a natural signal that we are blessed with. It's a gift that we have. There are a few random people with these mutations. They don't feel any pain at all. And of course, their lives are actually quite in danger because they can easily bruise themselves and have severe hemorrhaging without any
Right.
sensation. And if they didn't see their arms swell up or the blood pooling under the
You put your
skin,
hand on the
they could
stove and
die.
just melt your hand off and not know it. So until you smelt it or
Yeah,
something, right?
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Right. So we need to bring back this concept into society. First of all, we need to be real people. I have a whole piece on authenticity, but we need to be more engaged with other human beings in a more complete sort of way, not just through sort of taglines and ideological rants. But we also need to understand that it is our responsibility to take in and identify what kinds of signs, what kinds of signals that come from ourselves as well as come from other people that help us navigate where society is going, because it really is going to change so much more dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years. It will be unrecognizable, really, for people, let's say from 20 or 30 years ago.
What in particular? What specifically is going to be different?
Well, I'm just thinking about the problem of, for example, of the elderly. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm very much aware of older relatives and older friends and how they're trying to navigate the world
Mm,
today with the tools that we have. I mean, things like this podcast, our computers, our
right.
smartphones, um, just navigating pretty much any aspect of society, even the shopping side, but certainly any government interaction that you have to have some combination of online, offline, and they're feeling very
Yeah, I
lost.
I've had a personal issue with that where, loved ones, close loved ones need to go through some specific wickets with the federal government, and they don't physically live here. So I'm trying to help remotely at times, and it's just, I'm like, it's almost impossible for this person to navigate this electronic world, and you can't even call anybody half the time. Yeah, it's an issue. That's another, and that gets into the whole automation and how many jobs can we put, automate. That's a whole nother discussion.
Right.
But one thing I want
Yeah.
to touch on, you really, you mentioned ethics, and I was thinking about this the other day. If you look at, I don't know where I read it, but if you look at a lot of these games, and my son's always on these little, he's almost 6, and he's always on I mean, absolute addicted to gaming, right? I mean, I was when I was a kid too, but I didn't have, at his age, I didn't have them. So, but it happened later. But if you really look at how these games work, even the little free ones you download on his little tablet there, it is so, you could look at it, and from my layman's perspective, I just look at that and I said, there's as many psychologists as software developers creating that thing. There's no way, like the bonuses they give you and the incentives they give you to get hooked and get excited to go to the next level is it's first of all, it's brilliant. It's
Yes,
absolutely brilliant. I
it
can watch my
is.
son's eyes and he
It
lights
is.
up like a look, Daddy, I got a new hat. If I do this for another, I get another 10,000 coins, I'll get
Yeah,
a new outfit.
yeah,
I'm like 10,000 coins. It's going to take me
yeah,
2 days. But
yeah.
and you start looking around and psychologists are completely in lockstep with the software developers to make these things happen. So
Absolutely. A friend of mine is one of the pioneers of this whole concept of behavior
mm,
design, and his name is Professor B.J. Fogg, Fogg, appropriately, and his whole career is about the idea of behavior design. That in fact it is quite possible to create essentially software, a series of steps that will help people change their
yeah,
behavior. And obviously, you can turn that around and modify that so that if you are a purveyor of games or selling clothing or whatever it is that you want to manipulate your consumers' interest, it's entirely doable, and it feels good. That's what is so dastardly about this whole process. Of course, it's brilliant research, and it is about what motivates us as human beings and what kinds of incentives we respond to and the timing. And I mean, it's very, very
oh, it
sophisticated.
is, and
Um,
that for me, my question, I'm a small government guy. I think, hey, let me parent, and that's my job. If there's something going to happen, my child's going to learn something wrong or hear something wrong, or it's my job to fix it. I don't need external help. That's my viewpoint in the world. However, I'm looking at I don't like regulation. I'm usually poo-poo most regulations, but that being said, now I'm looking at these games and I'm wondering like sometimes taking this tablet away from my son I mean, my wife and I almost kill each other because getting the game out of his hand at times, we want to really limit screen time and, no, nothing at dinner. We're going to talk, some of those things that I
yeah.
think are so valuable. But I'm looking at these games like, is there an ethical line where these games, these psychologists, they're literally almost usurping the powers that parents have? And it's not just the child parent thing, but in general, at what point should we be aware that we're being manipulated? Or is it not even like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
No, I completely agree with that as well. You and I, we have so much that we find of common interest. Well, this professor friend of mine, he actually, and of course, he's been also a consultant to different kinds of companies. He has actually been dismayed at how his research and his understanding and the tools have in fact become, in that sense, corrupted or perverted. And this is where I think you and I had another conversation about
Yeah.
blockchain. So there are two aspects of blockchain I just want to mention here, and your listeners may or may not know much about blockchain, but
Yeah, define it, just to
the
start, just in case you're right. A lot of folks may not know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. So blockchain is a new technology that was invented about 10 years ago with actually all the component it's software. It's a software technology. All the component parts had been already known for quite some time, but they had never been assembled in this particular way. And the simplest way to just get a sense of what it is another term, a more technical term. We call it a distributed ledger technology. So we're all familiar with ledgers. A company has to keep its books somewhere, and that's a ledger. As an individual, you may also keep a record of your own expenses and income and so on for tax purposes, for example, and that would be a ledger. Now, imagine that you take a ledger from, let's say, from a business, and you make, let's say, 500 copies of this ledger, so 500 different databases that have exactly the same information, but there's software that binds them all together so that they are constantly updated, so all of them are synchronized, right? So if you went to ask for this information in any of those 500 servers, you would get exactly the same answer. And what this does is that any information that you preserve in this way now becomes more available, meaning that more people can access it. It's virtually immutable, cannot be easily changed. It can be decentralized, meaning no central authority can go in and alter any of the entries in that database, which they can do today, right? Like in a bank and so
Right.
on. That's a centralized database structure. Um, and was there something else? Transparency, availability. Uh, so the idea of the blockchain is that every time new data is entered into this database, each new entry actually contains kind of like a snapshot of the history of all the previous transactions that had taken place. So that's why it is a cumulative kind of record as well. And that makes it even more difficult to crack. All the data is encrypted. It's much harder for someone to come in and corrupt the system. So there are people who suggest that this could be like a next generation internet. If you could put information available, since the internet is this wild and woolly place, what if you actually made people accountable for what they post? And they don't have to reveal their true identity, but they would have to basically provide verification for the data points that they're uploading. And so that would create some sense of order. Another article, more recent article I wrote in Psychology Today was titled Blockchain's Moral Core. And
Yeah. So,
my premise is that this is the first tool that humans ever invented that actually gives advantages to good actors and disadvantages to bad actors. So the problem with tools, and particularly digital tools, the electronic tools today, is that criminals are at least as smart as the good guys. They have plenty of resources, meaning money and people. And they have powerful organizations that also understand network theory. And, they're beating the good guys because they have no constraints, right? They have no compunctions about being illegal or invading privacy or anything else. And this is so terrible. Now, blockchain, of course, a criminal could use it. If I were a criminal, I could use it for my own purposes. But if your data was already on a blockchain, then I would be very reluctant to participate in that because suddenly my identity would be available. Anything I did would be also available, and there'd be this record. Forget it. I don't want to be part of that. So, particularly in the area of public service and charitable work and so on, where this transparency is so important, this could be really very, very significant change. And the good news is there are attempts, legitimate attempts to develop applications for this all over the world. And I think the ones to watch are the ones in developing countries or regions where the basic infrastructure is not already very strong, right? Because that's kind of how or why it has real
right.
value in a society like America, where however we think about the government or big corporations, big banks, we more or less trust them, and they more or less work pretty well. Not 100%, but they generally, most people do feel a sense of trust. But in countries where the government is unstable, there's no stable currency, they don't have the
Right.
infrastructure for any number of things, including, for example, I think it's Nigeria, doesn't even have a way of recording births.
Mm.
So a baby is born, there's no birth certificate, there's no record of this baby being born. So how can you do any kind of planning for medical care or education, any provision of services? So these are the situations where if you were to introduce blockchain, suddenly you're providing a very stable kind of infrastructure. And I think that's one of the things I want to highlight. But it's this moral core, right? And the moral core is that if we participate in a blockchain, we voluntarily choose to share certain kinds of data for the common good, that it will help other people, it will help yourself, it would help me, but it also helps everyone else because the society or the organization as a whole will be able to function more efficiently. And this is what the banks have learned. They're going to do this on their own. IBM, Walmart is requiring all of its suppliers to upload their logistics data onto this. So all the suppliers from China, all the shipping handlers, everybody in between, until a product gets into the hands of a consumer, are going to be recorded on a blockchain. And they want to do it because it's real-time monitoring at a level that was never possible before. And they can save a lot of money, of course, but they can be more assured of things like food quality and so on. So there are some really interesting things happening. There's some things about artificial intelligence, also trying to build in a little bit of a conscience and use. Actually, both of those tools, blockchain and artificial intelligence, are being used to tackle some of the social media issues we've been talking about. So I think what I'm doing in the last 2 minutes here is just throwing out some tidbits, some teasers, maybe for your listeners, whether you and I or you and some other people talk about these or not. These are things that your listeners should be, if they're interested, can do their own research and see where these things are going and form their own opinions, have their own discussions with their families and friends and so on. And I think, again, ultimately, that's what this is all, it should be. Connectivity through social media, through the internet and whatever else, really needs to go back, must be grounded in a person-to-person connectivity. Otherwise, it's not tethered, right? It has no relevance. It's just people who want to shout, and shouting has never brought world peace, much less anything else.
Right. No, that was, I mean, and just to close that blockchain concept, I mean, a lot of folks think it's just for digital currency. Blockchain in itself is so much wide. It can be applied so much more, broadly than that. If you just search blockchain
Yeah,
internet, you'll get, the internet 2.0 is going to be a blockchain internet, completely decentralized,
right,
not a Facebook or a Google
right,
or any one of these things, right?
right,
So that's
right.
fascinating. But sounds like we can kind of end on a good note. Sounds like you gave us some some hope, to a lot of the crap we
Well,
talk about.
I'm right. Well, I'm always an optimist. I have to be. And certainly, I think my training as a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur hopefully gives me a combination of being a critical thinker, a very detailed observer, but ultimately an optimist in the sense that you have to be an optimist if you want to do things. You want to support companies. You want to work with companies that are going to provide the kinds of benefits that we're talking about. You've got to believe, and you also fundamentally have to have faith and hope in human nature, that there will always be more people who are inclined to good compared to the ones who are inclined to bad. Because if we really look at a dystopian future and think that we're all just going to tend to the dark side, I just don't think that's just really too
No,
depressing.
I think you're 100% right there. And I think things like this, right? You and I having this conversation, right? I think just having these conversations, and again, one of the motivations for me having this, starting this podcast was literally to hopefully get some of these concepts out there and make people go, oh crap, I didn't think about that. Let me think about that differently, or let me,
Well,
I think again, no debates, more conversations could be the root of so much more good.
yeah. So again, wrapping this up, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I thank you for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun.
I've enjoyed it.
This
Absolutely.
conversation, our offline conversations, and yeah, I think this is what it's about. This is how we will move society, how society evolves,
Yep.
literally, right? By sharing and accumulating more knowledge, and again, stressing, as you and I have already a couple of times, that the diversity is what helps us grow. We have to have the diversity, because it's not about, okay, he's a professor, he knows better, right? No,
Right.
I'm sorry. He's just one man, and his opinion,
Exactly.
who knows? There's so many other opinions, and I'm sure some of them are better. It's not about good or bad. It's simply about saying there, human life, human society is such a rich opportunity for everyone to enjoy and to build on, and we have to focus on that and not just get all caught up on tearing down the
Right.
celebrity du
No, I agree.
jour.
I think intellectual curiosity and general love for your fellow man, you can almost just go so far with those two things, but it's complicated. but we can go for another probably 2 hours here. But let me just,
Yeah.
hey, I appreciate the time, Dr. Wu. Thank you so much. And
No,
we'll
thank
definitely do
you.
this again.
Okay. Thanks, Vinny.
You got it. And we are done. This is Vinny with Unlatched Mind. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.